Hi, everybody. This is Jack Allwild with another money episode. Today, we have a very special guest, Cori Arnold. You can find her at I am Cori Arnold, spelled Cori, on Twitter, along with her over 160,000 subscribers. Cori, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, hi Jack. It's great to be here. Thanks a lot for having me.
Very grateful that you joined us. I mean, your Twitter says you went from negative net worth to millionaire in 10 years, which is very impressive. And it doesn't sound quite so hyperbolic that it doesn't sound unattainable. So I think that's a little more relatable. So before we get into the debt breakdown that you paid off, we like to take a step back and just learn a little bit more about you, your relationship with money growing up. So yeah, let's start
Sure.
there.
Yeah, sounds good. So like I said, I'm Cori Arnold. I started posting on Twitter about 2 years ago, and it's kind of ballooned from there. So that's been a cool part of the journey. But I started actually tweeting because I had really hit a bottom in my late 30s with money. I actually grew up. It's funny, people on Twitter say that I grew up wealthy, but I actually grew up around the poverty threshold. I love my parents. We had lots of love in our family, lots of great values. They just didn't make a lot of money. They still don't really make much money today, but that didn't seem to matter to them. And it's funny, they don't really care about money at all. They have what they need and they have great values. Something I learned early on, and I don't know if it's funny, I've seen pros and cons on this like how to teach your kids. But one thing my parents did is they gave us an allowance and you had to work for it. So every job had a certain value. And for me, I was a motivated kid. So, I went for the high value jobs, um, like cleaning the dog cage out. I think that was $5. Raking the leaves or whatever was a higher one. So for me, like learning that you needed to work for your money and really respecting money, that came full circle eventually. I'm glad I learned it early on. So I think it was somewhere in my subconscious, even though I made a ton of mistakes through my 20s with money. But at least I think my parents kind of put that foundation in place. So I was able to make that turnaround later.
And did you have siblings growing up?
I did. Yeah. I had a younger brother and younger sister. So I was the oldest.
What's the experience been like now that you're older? Look, any thoughts with them in relation to like how you grew up?
Actually, it's funny. They're both very good with their money. My brother, particularly, he is super, super frugal, and he's always been that way. I remember both of us actually lived in Los Angeles at the same time we just overlapped for a period. And I remember going to his apartment. He had all of his books. He didn't have a bookshelf, so he just had them like kind of on the floor, which is so funny. I was never real frugal. He was a natural saver. I'm a natural spender. So it's so funny, but he's great with money. My sister's also great with money. She literally will put her retirement or her retirement is automated. She never looks at it. I remember a few years ago, she hadn't looked at it in like 10 years. She just said yes. She signed up and then she never thought about it again. And, she had like six figures in her retirement. I'm like,
Wow,
you got to pay attention to that. But, so we're all a little different, but I think we're all okay, financially.
cool. So okay, let's get into it. So when negative net worth, and it does show, and I'm looking at a tweet July 4th, it's showing your
Mhm.
$260,000 of debt broken down. We have 140,000 student loans, 22,000 credit cards, and 98,000 in real estate. So I guess let's go with the real estate first, actually. What
Sure.
did that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. So I loved real estate from a kid. My grandma actually had rentals, and when I was younger, she would actually take me and I would go clean these rentals. And I thought it was so fun. I don't think normal kids probably think that that's a fun thing to do on your Saturdays. But from that early age, I just loved real estate. My very first job out of college was at a bank, so I was a mortgage lender, and I love that side of it. And then I actually got my real estate license and started flipping properties. So I've always liked real estate. I didn't necessarily go about it the right way. So my very first property I bought in 2009. So this is right after the crash. You would have thought that I would have got a really good deal on this property, which when I give you the purchase price, you might think it was a good deal, but it really wasn't. So I paid 68,000 for this duplex, which sounds really, really low today. But at the time, I mean, this duplex is in rural Ohio, so middle of nowhere. I overpaid for the property basically. And that was my very first purchase. I didn't do any research. Like I didn't look at the comp. I missed so many things. And then I didn't really hire great property managers. I hired these people who had no experience doing property management, but they were cheap. So that's kind of my lesson. Don't always go with the cheapest option. I had to evict tenants. I had water issues. I had bug issues. There were just all kinds of bad things. So I ended up selling that property in 2013. But in 2012, like a year before that, I actually put it on the market and I tried to sell it for a year. No one wanted it. So I finally had to bring my price down enough where I actually lost $8,000. So I
Okay.
sold it for 60,000 after I'd paid 68. So mistake after mistake on that first property. But the good thing is I sold it. And because I sold it, that was a huge win when it came to my debt balance. I can't remember the actual numbers, but I think around 60,000 minus the real estate commission. At the time, I was just starting to try to be debt free. And that was a huge win for me just from an interest. I think I saved about $2,000 a year on interest. Just having that debt gone was good.
Gotcha.
Actually,
Okay.
the second place, so that's only half of the debt,
Uh-huh.
the real
Yeah.
estate debt. The other place, I bought another fixer-upper in 2012, and this place I actually lived in. It was super cheap. It was a short sale, $50,000 in
Okay.
rural Ohio again, but in a bigger community. So it was still pretty much middle of nowhere, but at least a larger community where I had more competition. It was about an hour from a bigger city, and it was a mess. It was not livable. There was animal urine stains everywhere. Didn't smell the best. So my dad's pretty handy, so he helped with a lot of the actual work. And then I learned a ton, ripping up carpet, restaining the floors. We tore down a wall between the kitchen and the living room, put in all new cabinets. So it was a good learning experience. It was really tough though, because I was working at my full-time job and then I was working at Lowe's actually part-time on the weekends and then trying to remodel this house. So it was a busy time, but I got the nice discount at Lowe's for the remodel, renovation costs. And then I was also, even though I was kind of spending money, I was also trying to work on the debt. So it was kind of a mix, but that ended up being a good investment, which I lived in for 4 years.
Gotcha. I feel your pain on the ripping up the carpet. I'm doing that right now, actually, and it
Oh,
is
excellent.
I've vastly underestimated the time for ripping
Yeah.
up those staples.
Exactly.
So how did you actually finance those first two properties? Was that just conventional bank lending?
Good question. So the first property when I bought it in 2009, I was also getting my MBA, and you would think a person getting their MBA is smarter from a business standpoint, but I actually took some of my loans from my MBA, my student loans, used them as the down payment, and then I
Okay.
got financing for the other 90%. Not a smart move, by the way. I thought it was real smart when I was doing it, but it really wasn't. So that's how I got the first financing. Then the second financing, I actually went through the bank that I used to work at my very first job.
Oh,
So I actually was pretty friendly with the lender, and she did tell me, I'm going out on a limb for you because again, my down payment, I think I got it from borrowing from a credit card, which you don't want to do that. Like,
oh.
I did so many mistakes. You actually want to save up the money because it's so much smarter in the end and you save so much in interest. But I had that relationship. She did go out on a limb for me and it paid off. Of course, I paid her back. I kind of got fortunate in those two deals.
Okay, so so you mentioned that the MBA, I'm guessing the MBA contributed to that 140,000 student
Yeah.
loans. So what did you study in undergrad? I guess if you could talk us through
Yeah.
your schooling.
Sure. So I was kind of like degree crazy in my 20s. I got an undergrad degree in economics. So I
Huh?
got my 4 year degree there. Then I decided I was more interested in accounting. So I got a 2 year degree in accounting. And then I kind of overlapped those schools. They were from two different schools. And then when I was 27, I decided to go get my MBA. And it's funny, literally and the MBA was the most expensive. I think it was probably 100,000 of that
Oh,
140 in debt or in student loans. And I remember all I wanted to do was retire early, but I wasn't making any of the right moves. And I remember at the orientation of my MBA program, they basically said, "You're not here because you retire early." And I thought, oh, am I making a mistake? But I'm happy. I'm still happy I did it. It did cost me a lot of money because I didn't do it the right way, but that was the majority of it. Yeah.
okay. And we know some of the credit card debt went to the houses, I guess. Well, was there
Yeah,
anything else you were spend crazy for?
yeah. I mean, I think I said this earlier. I was a natural spender. I just spent what I wanted. Some of it could have been for that house. I think I was just living above my means as well. I was at the time, I did go get my MBA in Los Angeles. I was working. but I wasn't making a lot of money, and Los Angeles is pretty expensive. I had a very, very small apartment, but I also had tons and tons of clothes. Like my hobby was shopping, which is crazy today. I'm very different today. But at the time, that's what I wanted to do, and I didn't feel like I had limits, which was stupid to say the least.
So, okay, so you got the 260,000 of debt. And for people that want to like look line by line on your tactics, you can go July 4th. But why don't we break down? Because I think you have some unconventional ways about going about getting rid of this debt.
Yeah, probably. So the first thing I did was I listed that duplex for sale, and that was a huge, huge momentum change for me. I went from around 240 to, well, actually, you know what? Let me back up. I did one more stupid thing. From my job in Los Angeles, I moved back to Ohio. I had about 29,000 in a retirement fund that I had been contributing to like over the last 4 years or prior 4 years. I went ahead and withdrew all that money, and I paid a nice hefty payment on that and a penalty, but it left me about 24,000 bucks to pay off my debt. So I went from I think it was 260 to like 234 pretty quickly because of that, or 235. Then I sold the duplex, and it got down to 176. And the thing that woke me up, and again, that's a huge mistake. I do not recommend that anyone take out retirement, because that money, I mean, I would easily have like 120, 150K in that count now if I had never touched it again. So that's one thing I probably shouldn't have done. But at the time, I kind of needed like that momentum boost. So it did help, even though I don't recommend it to others. The other thing I did was I started tracking my debt. So before that, I had kind of tracked my net worth, and I saw, yeah, I'm in the red, it's negative. But for some reason in 2011, 2012, I decided to calculate the annual interest. So I just took the interest rate, multiply it times the principal balance, and that came up to like 16,000 bucks. And that's when I really thought, wow, because at the time my take home was about 48, 50,000. So
Wow.
that's literally like a third of my money going to interest. Yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, like there's no way I'm going to retire early if I'm paying that much in interest. And the debt is not worth it, basically. So that's really what it got me. Like I was like sick about it. I was on fire. I had to get rid of it. So that's when I had already done the retirement withdrawal and put the duplex up on the market. Next, I started attacking the biggest loans. At the time, my student loans, some of them were at 8.5% and some were at 6.8%, which were really, really high. I don't think they're that high today. And the other thing, I always had perfect credit. So I was never late on a payment. I may have maxed things out. I know I maxed things out, but I was never late. So I always had a decent credit score. And that really, really helped. The credit card companies offered 0% balances, basically, or transfers. So they would send me a blank check, and I would make sure that I had zero balance on that card. And then I would actually write a payment to my student loan company. And let's just say, for example, one of those checks, the term was 12 months. So that means I have 12 months to pay that balance off. If, for example, I could have paid, let's just say $1,000 a month on that payment, then I would make sure that I didn't transfer like more than $10,000 to that card, because that's the other thing. When you use 0% credit cards, you really want to make sure you pay it off within the term of the 0%. Otherwise, the credit card company, they're going to tack on fees, lots and lots of interest. So when you use 0% credit card transfer deals, which I highly do recommend if you're organized and you're going to pay it off, just make sure you can pay it off. Make sure you don't use that credit card in the future, because they'll get you with the interest if you do that. That was the big tactic. Other than like selling things, like I mentioned, working the part-time job at Lowe's, there was just like a lot of little things, but it all really came down to tracking and figuring out like how to get rid of that highest interest first.
Mhm. And you also refinanced a house and a car too,
True.
correct?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that. So actually that happened probably before the 0% cards. So I had bought that home that I lived in. When I first purchased it, I purchased it, and then the lender actually gave me it was almost like a hybrid construction loan, where they gave me some extra money to pay for the renovation costs, because the house really wasn't livable. So yeah, that's a great point. So actually my interest on that mortgage was higher than normal, because it's a higher risk when you're
Mhm.
renovating a property. The bank can't really guarantee that the renovations you put into it are really going to increase the equity of the home. So it was higher risk. The interest rate was higher. So I went ahead, refinanced that, and then within that, I was able to pay, I think, roughly 15 to 20,000 of high credit card debt off, and put it into a lower mortgage rate. I think I went from maybe, I don't know, 4.8 to 5% down to like 3.5, something like that on the mortgage. And then the credit card went from like, I don't know, 15 or 13% all the way down to that 3.25. So that was a great deal. And you're right, I refinanced the car. So I actually had an older vehicle. It wasn't worth that much. I think it was worth maybe 10,000 at the time, maybe more. It must have been worth a little bit more than that because I think I actually refinanced for 10,000. So I had no debt on it because I had actually partially paid for it with a credit card as well, and partially probably the student loans, to be honest. So I had no debt on it. And the bank said that they could get it, I think, a 6.5% interest rate. So again, I was able to pay off like, I don't know, 15 or 18% credit card with it. So yeah, just little tricks. Now, when you do all these refinances, I guess the one thing to watch out for is the fees. So for example, the car, I think there was a $300 to $400 like loan origination fee for it. And then at the end, there might have been a prepayment penalty. So make sure when you do the math that you actually, consider the fees, because sometimes the fees will outweigh the benefit of the rate decrease.
I guess I'm curious, like what this process that you're doing sounds a lot like the infinite banking process, just using a whole life policy. Have you
Oh,
used any of those? I'm kind of curious because the process
that's
you're
really
doing, because
interesting.
a lot of people have paid off a lot of debt. I mean, they're just swapping lower interest rate debt for some of their higher stuff. And you were doing it
Mhm.
intuitively with all of these other assets you owned already.
That's funny. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that, but
Okay.
yeah, exactly. I was really just trying to minimize that interest because
Right.
I see interest as a total waste. Like you're just throwing away your paycheck, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, amortization table, like learning how
Yeah,
to make them
exactly.
is a game changer to actually view
True.
how much interest one is paying. Okay,
Very
so
true.
cool. So I mean, it's an awesome story. And so I guess after you had gotten back to zero, like a zero net worth, like what was your strategy going forward after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you right before that, my goal was always to get to zero net worth. That was actually the goal before I paid off my debt because I kind of saw a quicker path there. So what I did when I kind of got serious about turning around my money, started tracking my debt, I started contributing 10% to my retirement account. And that was huge. So that was again around 2011. And we were, again, the market was still recovering from 2008, 2009. So I got, I wasn't like I was contributing that much, but I was contributing something every single paycheck. And I put it on, it was automated. I just let that go. I didn't really look at it. My focus was on the debt, and I didn't actually pay that debt off till 2016. So that was a really, really long journey. So I did have 5 years of contributing to retirement, which was nice. And that helped. Actually, when I did finally pay off my debt, I actually had, I think, six figures in retirement,
Cool.
which was awesome. So I wasn't literally starting from
Mhm.
zero. And I highly recommend that. I know there's some financial experts say pay off the debt first, then start investing. For me, it kind of gave me that head start. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have 100,000 net worth. I'm a tenth of the way there to becoming a millionaire. So I just kind of needed that fire to keep going. And then this is kind of funny. So after I paid off all my debt, I I was paying like thousands of dollars a month in debt payments. And after it was gone, all of a sudden my checking account started growing rapidly. So after the first year, I think I had around almost 40,000 bucks just sitting in my checking account because at the same time, I was in my 20s, I was the person that fell for all the get rich quick schemes. I tried the Forex, I tried penny stocks. I would lose money on all these stupid investments. So when I paid off all this debt, I really was possessive of that money. Like I did not want to lose it. I didn't want to invest in something stupid. So that's why I just kind of let it sit there for a long time. And then the next step was I actually put it in a CD because again, I was afraid I was so scared that I would just repeat my mistakes again. So I let it sit in a CD for like I think 6 months or a year. And then in 2018, I between 16 and 18, I had done a lot of research online on investing. And I also talked to some people who had experience investing, and they really recommended index funds or mutual funds. So that's what I did in 2018. I took the leap and I invested about 70,000 bucks into a couple or three mutual funds. And then the funny thing, I mean, it's funny now, but at the time it was a little sad. The market decided to go down. So for like 4 months, I was at a negative, or I had lost some of that 70 grand, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm repeating. the same mistake. But what I realized is I really should have dollar cost averaged over time. I probably shouldn't have put the whole lump sum in right away. So, everything is about learning. So now I know, you don't invest a huge lump sum right at once. You kind of dollar cost average. So that just means you divide up. What I should have done is probably put in 7,000 that week and maybe 7,000 2 weeks later or a month later over 10 months or so. So
Well, mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
When you're talking about, keeping up the fire, keeping the momentum going, were there any resources or books? I know you said you
Great point.
talked to other
Yeah.
people that invest, but
hmm
were there any other resources that you used?
That's actually a really good point because there were lots of times during this journey, like for some reason, the debt kept me on fire. Like I was ready to always pay it off. But then once the debt's not there, you're just building, building. As the market goes down, you could be down for like months or even a year. And it does get a little like depressing is probably not the right word, but a little
Mhm.
discouraged. Finding something that inspires you every day is huge. So, for example, like I used to watch the Susie Orman show when she had her
Oh,
show. Now she has a podcast. So I listen to that. I like Dave Ramsey. I don't necessarily, and it's funny, I don't agree with like everything Dave says, but it's really inspirational to me. I don't agree with everything Susie says, but it's inspirational to me. And I agree with enough of their content that it's still, I still enjoy it a lot. Lots of books. So there's so many authors. Like, I mean, the one that I really love is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon
okay.
Hill. That just talks about the power of your mind. And, we can all create, like, the cool thing is, I think almost anyone can really create wealth if they're patient, consistent, disciplined. It really comes down to just almost being boring about what you're doing.
Mhm.
Which a lot of us kind of want that excitement. And once I finally learned that you got to get past that, that's what helped. But yeah, podcast. I like a lot of books. Thomas Stanley, Everyday Millionaire is a great book. Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, they both have a lot of books. Even Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, I
Saki.
think.
Yep.
Just a ton of different books. I do try because you're right. It is really hard to like go in and day out sometimes, especially when the market's down. Like 2022 wasn't the best year. So it's just creating those habits and like you said, finding sources of inspiration.
So at this point today, are
Mhm.
you virtually all mutual funds, index funds? Are you still a little bit involved in real estate? What's your portfolio kind of look like
Yeah,
today?
so I recently made a really big change. So I have, let's say 60% is in index funds, and that's the vast majority of that is my retirement account. I used to have a good 20 to 30% in stocks, like single stocks. And then very recently I decided to buy a second home.
Hmm.
So now I have lots of real estate. So
Mhm.
I'm about, I don't know, 50% in real estate now. And it's funny. It really makes me sad to not have that money in the discount brokerage. But the house, I didn't get as big of a loan, so I'm gonna have this loan paid off by December, and then
Okay.
I can start investing again. So it was a hard decision. Like, do I get a mortgage or do I just use my stocks to pay it off? So I
Mhm.
went ahead and just did the stocks, which makes me a little sad, but I think it was the right decision in the long run.
What area was the real estate purchased in?
It's in Ohio, actually, so
In
it's not
Ohio.
far from Columbus. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And so sorry. So it was like the 20% stocks originally that you like liquidated to
Uh-huh.
purchase the
Yeah.
real estate.
Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
okay. I'm with
Yeah,
you.
and I took out a small mortgage to pay the remainder. Yep.
Mhm. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And what do you see for like the next 5 years?
Good question. It's funny. So in this specific area, like from a real estate perspective, I think there's a lot of growth. It's funny, a lot of people, everything I've heard, it sounds like the prices, we're not going to see a dip, even though I know a lot of people are talking recession and a repeat of 2008 and 2009. I don't think it's going to happen. It's tough. We might see a dip in stocks, I think, in 2024, just based on what I've heard. But I think for some reason, I think real estate is okay. It might flatten out for a while, like we might not see any growth for a while, but I don't think there's going to be much of a dip, especially like we experienced, 15 years ago.
Mhm. So would you say you might shift a little more money into real estate going forward, or how's that
It's
look?
always a temptation. It's always a
Uh-huh.
temptation, definitely. But no, right now at this like
Yes.
Today, no.
Okay,
Today,
cool.
to be honest, I actually just moved into the new place and we renovated it, and it's been so much work. So like the last 2 months have been absolutely crazy for me, but I'm liking it a lot. So right now I'm
Awesome.
kind of burnt out from real estate, to be honest.
Okay. No, it's good. It's good to hear to both sides. Some people love real estate. Some
I,
people,
yeah.
it's more active than I think people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like a real estate deal is the best thing for me. When I was flipping properties, just that being at the closing, I mean, that is just it's so fun for me. But the problem was we were so slow at flipping because I work, my other half works full time. So we were really just working like on the weekends at the flip, and we didn't hire a bunch of it out. So
Mhm.
each flip took like 9 months to a year. So it was just so long in the making.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think in the near future, it's probably my flipping days are probably slowing down, to be honest.
Okay. Well, as we wind down, I like to ask everyone that comes on, what's the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
Okay, best. The best is, aim to be the tortoise, not the hare. So that just means slow and steady. And my younger self, like I'll tell you, I'm a great driver, okay? But I like in my 20s and even today, I like to speed. Like I don't like to waste time on the road. I just like to get where I'm going. And I actually had so many speeding tickets that I got a letter and they were going to actually suspend my or they were warning me that they might suspend my license. So I am not a patient person, and that's probably what got me in so much trouble in my 20s because I just wanted to do something, I wanted the result immediately. And when it comes to money, it doesn't work that way. You have to slow down and you have to be steady about it. You have to create a plan. So for me, aiming to be that tortoise every day, even though naturally I want to be the hare, that's the best advice I've ever heard. And when I finally like accepted it made a world of difference.
Okay. So the advice is like slow down.
Exactly. Slow
But
down.
what about the worst? I mean, I guess is it the same? It's like two sides of the
Yeah,
like
let me
what your
think about the
worst
worst.
advice is.
Yeah, the worst advice. It's kind of funny. I love my parents. But they have never been I think I mentioned this earlier. They've never really been like career driven or money driven, or they're just really, really satisfied. And I grew up and I love my family, even the extended family, but they all are very content just, working 40 hours a week and planning to work 40 years of their life.
Mhm.
And I never wanted to do that. And I never wanted to follow that advice because I think we can control so much of our time if we make the plan up front and we do the investing up front. Maybe take the hard road in your 20s and then you can, basically reap the rewards in your 40s, 50s, 60s. I don't think we have to wait until 65 to retire. And I know that people talk about that a lot on Twitter, but it is so true. Like there are so many beliefs that people just pass on to you and they don't even maybe know that they're passing them on. But that's one that I saw in my family that I don't think that's good advice. I think you got to take control sooner.
Okay, so Cori, someone in their mid-20s right now is listening to this. What's the number one action step they should go and do?
Yeah. For me, and this again isn't going to sound like great advice on Twitter, but for me, get a 9 to 5, get a regular paycheck, and then worry about the side hustle. If you want to open a business, which is awesome. I mean, I love entrepreneurship. Open that side hustle, but do it on the side. Make sure you've got a steady 9 to 5 until that side hustle takes off. The other thing is avoid debt. And I know that coming from me, that's kind of ironic and maybe even yeah, just ironic. But you don't need it today. Whatever you think you need today, you probably don't need it. So just be patient, save up for it, and I promise it will come in the future if you're patient.
Awesome advice. So Cori, it's been a pleasure having you on. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can go learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jack. I've had a lot of fun today. Yeah, so you guys can find me, like Jack mentioned earlier, at Twitter, at I am Cori Arnold. I'm also on Instagram and Threads at the same handle. And then I have a blog at winwithyourmoney.com. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, awesome.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Jack.